Imagine waking up and the monarchy you thought you knew has been quietly rewritten overnight. Titles vanish, family lines are redrawn, and palace whispers turn into headline chaos. Stick around. In the next few minutes, you'll learn exactly who's at risk, why this may be more than ordinary royal pruning, and how one bold reform could redraw the map of modern monarchy forever. This isn't garden party gossip. It's a possible reboot of how the crown will define itself in the 21st century. At the center of the storm is a single idea. If you don't serve the institution, should you still wear its highest honors? Insiders say a legal tool exists to do exactly that, to quietly strip the most prestigious styles from relatives who live outside royal duties, and it's reportedly being discussed for the very first weeks of a new reign. The aim, supporters say, is simple: a leaner, more accountable monarchy. The effect, critics warn, would be brutal and deeply personal. Let's unpack who's on the chopping block and why this feels like an upheaval rather than a tidy administrative cleanup. First, there's Prince Andrew. Once one of the most senior dukes, now the figure whose scandals have shadowed the family for years. He has already signaled he'll give up certain titles. A formal move to strip him of the Dukedom of York would only codify what many see as inevitable. For Andrew, this would be a symbolic downgrading, still a prince by birth, but not carrying the ducal identity that once defined his public life. Then there's Prince Harry, the son who stepped away from frontline duties and moved to California with his wife. What looks like a policy about working royals quickly becomes personal when the next layer includes Harry's children. Two young members of the family, raised thousands of miles from Westminster pageantry, could one day find their princely and princess titles removed. Imagine the headlines and the family tension. Are titles rewards for service, or rights you inherit at birth? The answer that's chosen here will say a lot about where the next generation of this institution stands. It doesn't stop at immediate royal rollbacks. Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, daughters of Andrew who lead largely private, professional lives outside royal duties, are also reportedly in the crosshairs. Both hold princess titles, but neither performs full-time royal roles. Both have careers, lives, and public identities that aren't built around palace work. Removing their titles would be a striking move. It would mean trimming close relatives who have, in many ways, already stepped beyond the monarchy's daily orbit. Meanwhile, other cousins such as Zara Tindall and Peter Phillips, who never used princely titles publicly, underscore the question: why are some family members expected to keep styles while others quietly don't? There is historical precedent for tightening who may use royal styles. In 1917, King George V issued letters patent that narrowed title usage, essentially slimming the family for a wartime, image-conscious age. The mechanism being discussed now, the same legal route used a century ago, would be the modern equivalent, repurposed for a very different challenge: relevancy and reputation in a social media era that magnifies every misstep. What's really at stake? On one hand, supporters argue a smaller, service-focused royal family is pragmatic. It keeps public costs and obligations manageable, concentrates ceremonial duties on a stable core, and presents a clearer brand to a public that expects institutions to justify themselves. On the other hand, this approach slices into intimate family dynamics. It could read as punitive, a penalty not only for past scandals but for distance, choices, even geography. For those who've already tried to live outside the royal lattice, being officially demoted would likely sting, privately and publicly. Beyond family fallout, the political and PR consequences are huge. Parliamentary approval would be required for any formal changes using letters patent, which means the conversation spills straight into public debate and elected politics. Media outlets will parse motives. Is this a necessary modernization or an act of familial exclusion? Public opinion will decide whether the crown looks decisive and modern or cold and fractious. And what about the human stories? Think beyond titles and toward identity. For children who may grow up identified with royalhood one day only to be told otherwise, the psychological and cultural narratives are complex. For cousins who have quietly built independent lives, a sudden title removal could feel like a public rebuke for choices that had nothing to do with performance or loyalty. We're watching a defining moment. One side frames it as efficient stewardship of a historic institution. The other sees a painful, possibly unnecessary fraying of family ties. Either way, the debate lays bare something bigger: how a hereditary institution adapts to a world that measures legitimacy differently than it did a century ago. Where do you land? Is a pared down, duties first monarchy the future, tougher but clearer? Or does this risk turning the crown into an unforgiving gatekeeper that punishes people for living their lives? Drop your thoughts below. If you want fast updates as this story develops and analysis that cuts through palace spin, subscribe to Royals Explored and turn on notifications. This conversation is only beginning, and the chapters to come could reshape the monarchy for generations.